And so I would like to um, thank Dr. Rachana Bhangaokar for joining us. Um, it's been a long time. Oh, maybe video is still not on. Oh, it's been a long time. I wanted to meet you, so I'm happy that we have this opportunity. Thanks to my colleague, Dr. Jinkia Navarre. And without making everybody wait for more, just a few words about you. So, Dr. Bhangaokar, she heads the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at this Maharaja Sayajirao University of Vadodara in Gujarat. Okay. Her research interests are really amazing, and it includes cultural psychology, Indian perspectives on moral development, which includes concepts like, of course, Dharma, Karma, Yoga, and Shraddha, particularly. And she has also looked into research in traditional and modern eating patterns. So, and also youth civic engagement and Gandhian philosophy. So, a wide range of research interests, but all centered on Indian, let's say, society and perspectives. So, welcome to you again. And the floor is yours. Yes?
Thank you, Dr. Surya. And of course, Ajinkya, who's not here, Dr. Ajinkya Navre, who's really been instrumental in sharing his Karma Yoga tool with us that we've been able to use for a number of studies. I welcome all of you. Thank you for your patience with all the tech glitches. And with your permission, I will start sharing my slides if
Yes,
okay.
please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, can you see my slides? They
Yes.
need to be in full screen mode. Yeah, if you can see my slides.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I'm going to basically talk about navigating adulthood. We'll talk about Indian families, the evolving Indian family, the evolving workplace, and well-being as something that is of critical interest today in a fast-paced life that we are leading. I am also going to give a little overview of the field of human development and family studies and why we should study life stages. So essentially, when we do human development and family studies, we draw heavily from developmental psychology. But at the same time, we are an interdisciplinary applied social science. So we also have a number of outreach initiatives to understand the unfolding of human development in the real world and the challenges therein. And like psychology, human development also is dominated by Euro-American theorization, the milestones in theorizing the lifespan and how it unfolds. And so one of the efforts that the department over years has done, and some of my work, is also to contextualize human development, to understand it embedded as it is embedded in a cultural context. Look at gender as a critical influence on human development. So for today's talk, I'm going to focus more on the urban Indian context because that is where some of our research on the life stage of established adulthood or Grihasthashram roughly has started. And when I say Grihasthashram, I'm not looking at only the traditional understanding of it, but also to look at how how adulthood and stability in adulthood, irrespective of the marital status, looks like. I would like to also draw attention of the audience to the important milestones in established adulthood and how gender role ideologies evolve or influence this life stage, and critically look at individual and familial or communal well-being, collective well-being. And I'm drawing much of my research evidence from a study on work-life balance, as well as a couple of other studies on dharma and moral development that we have conducted. I want to conclude the presentation with some discussion and perhaps some points to look at. How can we develop policies that are context sensitive, whether that context is the family, the workplace, or the larger community. And these are all my students cited in the references: Dr. Niyati Pandya, Ms. Zoya Mohammadi, who is completing her doctoral work, and Ms. Akanksha Sant, whose preliminary qualitative study on established adulthood was extremely important to set the stage. So the concept of established adulthood as a life stage, as a quote unquote novel or new life stage, was floated by Claire Mehta and Arnett in 2020, characterizing it by calling it a rush hour of life. And this is, of course, all US centric. The age group of 30 to 45 years, and looking at the traditional markers in their society, like a stable job, a conscious decision to get married or enter parenting, those kinds of quote unquote traditional markers that were studied. And one of the conclusions that they made was that this life stage was not really studied as much as one would have liked, even in the US. And some of the important things or domains that they point out as important in this life stage is that physical health becomes better as compared to earlier ages or emerging adulthood, which is 18 to 25 years. Cognitive aspects go through changes. There is more stability in decision making, for example. They also highlight the career and care crunch, which is a gendered experience. And they also look at various romantic relationships or partnerships that one may have, and they do indicate that there could be social class differences. Importantly, they also say that there will be variations away from the traditional markers. So there are, for example, now more single people, people who are coupled but do not want children. There is one full-time parent. Sometimes you don't really kind of settle into a career, but really dabble with different kinds of jobs, even though you are in established adulthood. And so this kind of wraps up the stage to say one could get a feeling of thriving or arriving versus the flip side of it being regret or the need for renovation in this life stage. Now, I want to draw parallels to established adulthood in India, if we just look at the age groups, and the grihastha ashram or the householder stage in the four-part ashram dharma template. The householder stage roughly is between 25 to 50 years of age. Marriage is an important rite of passage or samskara for somebody to enter into grihastha ashram. This life stage or this particular stage is important also because others depend on the householder for caregiving, maintenance of family life, etc. And so the householder stage, the grihastha stage, both for men and women, is extremely important because it really becomes the cradle of dharma, where all that you have learned in the earlier stage, you actually put into practice, and the centrality of being responsible, not just for your own development, but also being responsible for the larger family and society through your kartavyas and your swadharma, or identifying it and acting upon it, become really important. And so this stage is significant to lead a dharmic life and to propagate it in society. These are, of course, in very broad strokes, some traditional ideas that I'm kind of bringing to people's notice. Now, if we look at contemporary India, especially urban India, it is a modernizing, globalizing context. We know that the age of marriage is rising. relationships are, especially romantic and marital relationships, are going through a number of changes, and we see variations. In certain social classes, middle, upper middle class, we see dual earners. Even, I mean, the need to earn and have enough economic resources percolates way down also to the lower socioeconomic classes. But, you know, dual earners, increasing levels of education, aspirations to be upwardly mobile, all of these things we do see around us in society, and perhaps in our own families as well. Family structures are changing, and this obviously will lead to some change in the gender roles and the division of work that we see at the household or the family level. And so in the contemporary urban Indian context, we see that individual pursuits, the focus on autonomy, materialism is definitely heightened. So in order to understand established adulthood as a stage, we looked at Vadodara as a case in point, and we did a study using a grounded theory approach, a qualitative study. And we asked people what was their experience of this particular stage and their lived experiences. And importantly, because it was a grounded theory approach, the sample was really varied. We had people who were never married, people who were widowed, divorced. So not just in terms of marital statuses, but also social class, levels of education, etc. We covered a range of people who were in this life stage, and we found some interesting results that I would quickly share through this diagram. So when people were asked, do you feel like an adult? Majority said yes, and a couple of them said, well, not really. And some interesting experiences people shared, like somebody said that when I am inside my house and I have people to take care of me, I feel like a child. But when I have to go outside the house, do some earning or whatever else, I feel like an adult. And so they did talk about responsibilities, a sense of independence that came with taking decisions, managing your everyday life all on your own, paying your own bills, for example, and a variety of roles that they entered in that they had not experienced before. Like after marriage or parenthood, you take up the role of a daughter-in-law, a wife, a mother. Professionally, different roles were taken up. And so all of these really gave us a snapshot of what established adulthood looked like in urban Vadodara. And through the qualitative analysis, we could come to four very important indicators of established adulthood in urban Vadodara. And one of it was family centrality. How your relationships with your parents, and if you're married, with your parents-in-law, how they become very central to your everyday life, to your planning as well. How families support, whether it was a decision to have children, to manage daily chores, childcare, managing work and family. Family support was very critical. And this was also the stage where investment in your own children or younger generation of the family was central, or very kind of tied to your own roles and your own being. Similarly, the prominence of marriage was also seen. So as a samskara, or as an important milestone in adult life, marriage was prominent. However, we also had people who were cohabiting or were in long-term romantic partnerships. And so they highlighted the need for companionship. Women particularly said that it was a huge life transition for them, taking up responsibilities in a new family if they were married, or taking up the responsibilities of elderly parents, and how life had changed around it. Children, depending on how young or independent your children are, impacted the quality of marriage. And the partner's support, not just in this stage, but also later on, was something that was very critical to their experience of this stage. And of course, people aspired to have stable jobs financially. They wanted to be stable so that they could plan for a future or retirement, and then gradually focus on their own goals like traveling or pursuing a hobby, etc., which they could not do because there were other responsibilities in this stage. So there was this approach to say that everything cannot and should not perhaps be had only in this one life stage, and there is a time for everything. So this kind of a sense we could gather from the interviews. And of course, they also wanted to focus on self-development. Friendships particularly were very important and also underwent a lot of change, in the sense that people aspired to have mature friendships. They wanted friendships only if there was mutual commitment from both friends. And there was a latent interest in pursuing some hobbies more in terms of self-care, or wanting to navigate this life stage in a relaxed manner. So we've seen a snapshot of established adulthood in a tier 2 city like Baroda or Vadodara, and I will now go on to some demographic information about this life stage in India, particularly urban India. We see that now, as per the census and some demographic figures, the median age in India of individuals is 28.2 years. We still continue to primarily live in joint and extended family. Even though there are social class differences, there is a certain fluidity in taking care of elderly parents, for example. And so you can't quite say that family is always extended. So parents, for example, move from one child's house to another child's house, depending on the need or depending on some arrangement in the family. And so this fluidity is really something that is perhaps supportive of established adults. Our sex ratio in the urban areas is still not looking very good. It is still below 1,000. In rural areas, it's improving over the years. Incidentally and shockingly, we have the lowest labor force participation of women in the world at about 27%. And one of the reasons for this is restricted mobility of women. In one of the surveys, they found that only 38% women, as compared to 88% men, go out of the house for anything. And this kind of skewed mobility or participation in the outside world was essentially because women, because of the influence of marriage, having young children, sometimes, so education and work really became very strong reasons to step out of the house. And it was also found that there were a lot of women now getting into education, but they largely remained absent. So they were enrolled but absent. And education and work, we can see unequal opportunities for women still persist. And our public spaces, our spaces for commuting, our spaces for having public life are essentially masculine in nature, in terms of very high concerns for safety, women's safety. And so this also acts as a deterrent for women to participate in public life. Or go for work or study or whatever. And another important finding of these surveys is that women spend 8.5 hours per day in care work, cooking, cleaning, taking care of children, elderly, etc., as compared to men who spend less than an hour on a regular basis. And much of this work, the care work, is unacknowledged. Especially around COVID, it became very, very difficult to manage both work and home, especially for women. We also see that emphasis on marriage, the pressure to get married sometimes, although marriage is an important milestone in adulthood, there is a certain pressure around it. Alongside that in that trend, we also see a rising number of young people wanting to remain single, not wanting to get into marriage. And that percentage has increased from 17.2% to 23% recently. We have 72 million single women, the largest ever that India has encountered ever. And so the number of single women is rising. Women are proudly single. That's a tag that they are using. And it is expected that the working class population, perhaps this is a corporate survey which said that women in the working age, 25 to 44, about 45% of them will choose to remain single and childless by 2030. Men, on the other hand, are having a hard time getting married. They feel pressured to earn more in order to maintain a family. And men's mental health is turning out to be a serious concern in India, with more men committing suicides and also engaging in substance abuse as compared to women. Hormonally, physiologically, if you see, men have a fight or flight response to stress, whereas women have a share and befriend or tend and befriend kind of a response to stress. And this also has a very important bearing on well-being. Coming to the way we will be able to talk about, or we will discuss traditional gender roles. All of the traditional gender roles put pressure on sticking to the stereotype, and of course also the, as a consequence, lead to some influence on well-being and mental health. Men also tend to take traditional gender roles more seriously. They feel pressured and do not have spaces to talk about it. They are also low on health literacy, and the stigma attached with seeking support for any kind of mental health issue is much more among men. And so we can see that urban India is really in a flux between tradition and modernity, and patriarchy really in a very insidious, systematic way seems to be affecting our men, women, families, and perhaps also children. I'm just going to share a couple of responses that have come from our study on work-life balance and another study on gender roles. So being an Indian woman, these are both responses from women who are established adults. So being an Indian woman, I don't know, there is a notion around who is a good woman or good women. तुम्हें अच्छी भाभी बनना है, तुम्हें अच्छी बेटी बनना है, तुम्हें अच्छी बहू बनना है. वो अच्छे का definition सब अपने हिसाब से बना लेते हैं. So there is this need to match up to that gold standard. For a mother-in-law, अच्छी बहू कौन है जो अपने आप को भूल जाए. So this was a participant, a dual learner from a dual learner family. Similarly, we had another woman reflect on her experience in established adulthood and say that, somehow, although we have equivalent or equal opportunities before marriage in terms of education and in terms of careers, suddenly after marriage, things change. And those outcomes are different for men and women. So no matter what, in childhood, we are given everything. We give everything to our sons and daughters equally, but after marriage, the girl has to set everything aside, education, career, sometimes even the names are changed. And then when the kids come into the picture, there's another barrier, essentially because there is no support. Even employers and the policies at the workplace are not really very friendly to caregiving roles. And so the differences are here to stay, even after equal education and opportunity. And so women particularly voiced that they find it difficult to navigate all of the roles put together on a day-to-day basis. And these are dual learner families, so all of the working women especially, and upper middle class women for this particular study. I'm now going into the understanding of gender role and gender roles, and we looked at this concept of gender role ideology, which is tried and tested in a number of cultures and also in India. One of the ways to understand it is to understand it as an attitude towards all the societal roles that we have for men and women, and the intrapsychic aspects of gender that influence your identity, your behavior, the roles that you choose, how do you choose to enact them, etc. And there are these two dimensions to gender role ideology. One is the traditional gender role ideology, in which women should give priority to family responsibilities, and men should give priority to work responsibilities, very clear, cut and dry. Women work inside the house, men work outside the house, kind of a thing. And the other ideology or the other attitude that one can have, irrespective of whether one is a man or a woman, in both cases, is an egalitarian gender role ideology, where individuals believe in an equal role distribution. They're less likely to emphasize men's careers or object to women's employment. And so in an egalitarian gender role ideology, people respond to circumstances irrespective of the bindings of social roles that every culture may have prescribed. So one of the things that we did in Zoya Mohammadi's study was to send out a survey to people, dual learners. We wanted to check their life balance. We wanted to look at work-home interactions, whether there was a need for recovery, how much leisure satisfaction did they have. We assessed gender role ideology, and we also assessed them on a well-being scale developed in India. And then we followed this up, and we tried to see that there are people from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, dual learners, and from different sectors, whether it was IT or banking or this or that. And then we followed it up with a small subsample from this big one, and we did in-depth interviews with them, and we integrated the insights into the results. And I will share just a glimpse, in the interest of time, a glimpse into how gender role ideologies really influence well-being. So in the table, you will see, okay, let me first go to the graph. So here in the graph, you see that the gender role ideology for men and women is on one side, and the number of children that one has. And you see that men's gender role ideology moves to becoming more traditional as soon as the number of children is increasing from 1 to 2, from 0, 1 to 2. In case of women, perhaps there is very little change, but in case of men, there was a significant change. And we will, in a moment, come to perhaps why that is, discuss why that is happening. Here we see what predicts well-being, and we see that conflicts that transfer from family to work, enrichment, whether it's from the work or from the family, they all have an influence on well-being. Leisure has an influence on well-being, significant, and gender role ideology as well has an influence on well-being. And so the reason perhaps for men to have more traditional gender role ideology is perhaps this pressure, because now the family is expanding, the pressure to earn, the pressure to perhaps raise children in a particular manner, befitting the cultural norms, etc., could be at play. And so we are looking at some of these trends, very interesting trends that are coming up in the study. The other is also the moderating effect that gender role ideology has on it. So when we looked at people who had a combination of gender role ideologies, both traditional and egalitarian, so it was not either or. We also looked at a composite kind of gender role ideology where you had a mix of tradition and egalitarian. We found that those with egalitarian kind of approaches to gender roles really had better well-being, or this influence of gender role ideology, egalitarian gender role ideology, was much more on well-being. So we looked at the interviews to say, okay, let's understand what's really happening day in and day out when people are navigating their lives, taking care of work and family and balancing perhaps all of that. And so women really did show discontent to say that men's involvement was confined to being a financial supporter, making major decisions, and engaging in tasks outside the family. Men also confessed, most of them, to say that yes, they were unavailable, sometimes even unaware that my help might be needed in this place or inside the house. And some of the men also responded to say that early gender socialization in the family, they had never seen other men work, for example, inside the house. Women negotiating role divisions, strategizing. So it was very empowering. Women made decisions to say, how will I make this work? So they sought support from sources that were available. They spoke to their spouses. And although men were not really wired to do household chores, many of them really also tried to support their wives. And this really was a very critical factor. Women really felt supported day in and day out. And women's ideas of men's involvement were also, they did understand that men have demanding workplace responsibilities to cater to. So we do get it. And men also acknowledged that they needed to contribute more, and they were falling short of women's or their wives' expectations when it came to the house. Women felt accountable and guilty because they were somehow intrapsychically holding themselves primarily responsible for the household or the running the house and taking care of people. And men believed that their role was not really as crucial as that of women. And so this debate really became the microcosm of working things out on a day-to-day basis. Overall, what was interesting was that all the women in the interviews, or majority of them, said that they had supportive husbands, or in whatever way possible, men were trying to support them. But men never really said that my wife supports me so that I can go out and work at home. So this kind of unsaid, taken for grantedness, that this is something that you will have to do because you're in this role, was something that was a little problematic, and we hope to respond to it in some way through our publications. And so, this is how they would navigate their problems. Women would create a supportive ecosystem. They would either hire help or look up to their own parents to take care of childcare. They wanted equal partners, and they would negotiate for that. They would see to it that the husbands would in some way or the other support them. Men also would take up job roles that would in a way meet the family's needs from time to time. Becoming a father was really critical for men in terms of changing their perception in the family. And they were also cognizant that both spouses had work pressure and family responsibilities. So based on this evidence, we are now working on creating a program that is rooted or anchored in Indian knowledge systems. We are looking at guna, from the three gunas, which is not really personality, but responsiveness from time to time. So depending on the current environment or the context, you respond to it wisely. We are looking at dharma. We are looking at family roles. We are also looking at gender roles in terms of the variety of responsibilities that men and women have to play in the contemporary context. And we are also looking at the stage of life, say, even within the grihasthashram, or even within this particular life stage of established adulthood. What are some of the demands that you have? Say, for example, when you have very young children versus when your children are slightly more independent, the equation changes dramatically. So one of the things that we are doing is create activities, or create like a program where we focus on achar, which is healthy activities, yogic practices, ahar, which is nourishment for the body and the mind, and vihar, which is leisure or recreational activities. And we want to develop a program that will empower an individual and not become one more add-on to be done, or gamify it, or kind of incentivize it like any other app. But we want to look at it to say, okay, if this is done, do people really see a change in their vichar, which is their thoughts as well as their attitudes, and their conduct towards healthy relationships. So this is a work in progress, and Zoya Mohammadi has a grant through which she's planning to develop this into a full-fledged program that can be used by employed Indian adults. Drawing another finding from another study with Dr. Niyati Pandya, we find that many established adults, when they talked about gender roles, they also talked about the markers of who is a good grahastha. And this is, of course, all within the confines of a marital relationship. I'm sure more research is needed even with people who are out of the marital context, but established adults or mature adults. And so when we talk to people about their roles in the grihastha ashram, or the markers of who is a good grihastha, man or woman, they said that one is to perform the role of a provider. So this providing is not necessarily economic, but also providing to meet the needs of all family members. It could be needs like emotional needs of people, to maintain family harmony. Was a marker of a good grahastha, to ensure happiness of the self and the other, to avoid any kind of klesha or disharmony, to ensure the best interest of the family. So, people did talk about the fact that children are looking at us, they're looking at the way we behave as parents. And so if we are going to be fighting and bickering, that is not in the best interest of the family. Similarly, developing equanimity, samta, becoming more sthita prajna or steady in one's wisdom, to have discretion or prudence, vivek, mastery in what you are doing, whether it's cooking or working outside the home or whatever. And so moving from a self-centered idea to a family-first idea, devotion to the family, to ensure your well-being as well as the family's well-being. And many of them did not really look at the two as different, to say that, oh, my well-being and the family's well-being. It was very fused and intertwined. And so one of the verbatim responses sums this up to say that these are today's challenges for men and women. Both need to manage earnings, relationships, and the family depends on them. So you can see resonances with the traditional framework that I just talked about. They will ultimately have to let go of their selfishness, stubbornness, and think about the family's happiness instead. They will have to work on themselves and each other for family's well-being. Both have to sacrifice something for children and others in the family. And so they will need to do what's in the best interest to keep the family intact. That will be their main dharma in adult life. Once a person becomes selfish, the marriage ends, the family that depends on them will be affected, relationships will suffer, and that's not good for anyone. So they will have to find a way that works best for them to be together, to support and manage the workload. So especially when they talked about the career and the care crunch as they experienced it, if at all they experienced it, this was also one of the responses that we got. And so from a number of studies, we are now finding that self-development, constantly critically engaging in self-refinement through your everyday life, fulfilling your kartavyas, choosing your karma, your actions, your deeds on a day-to-day basis in relationships, having shraddha, trust in your own abilities, trust in the family members, all of this feeds into self-improvement. When you focus on your own dharma, you develop a strong moral conscience, you appreciate the value of life, the value of togetherness, and you frame family life around a certain niyam or a discipline, or you kind of develop values like gratitude. All of this feeds into refining your own self. And this eventually, one of the outcomes, a very strong outcome of this, is that well-being, progress, whether it's financial progress, stability, good relationships in the community. All of it depend on how you understand this, how you constantly work at yourself, chipping away at the negatives and kind of, molding yourself into a grihastha who is kind of trying to match up with the ideal. And this is, of course, not linear. This is an ongoing iterative process. So, one reflects, one learns, unlike many Western models, which are very linear and binary. I now want to kind of, as we move towards the end of the presentation, I now want to look at some ideas of well-being that are prominent, and some very interesting, beautiful work is coming through in this area. So well-being, selfhood, and culture are inseparable. One cannot look at or kind of copy paste a model from outside and understand these constructs. Mishra emphasizes on the self-other continuity in India and how we've had a holistic, systemic perspective, even when we look at the self as a fluid, kind of a concept that is not autonomous and bound as explained in many Western theories. Pandit, who's perhaps also in the audience, I hope, looks or talks about the other as a non-object in her book on reclaiming the science of well-being from the Indian lens. She also talks about bhava and rasa, which is so critical to our everyday life. And she talks about how the shanta rasa is a foundational rasa that, I mean, needless to say, it is so critically connected with the idea of well-being, because theoretically, she explains how the Shanta Rasa is a foundation for any kind of insight or seeing, as it were, seeing inside in as well as seeing outside. The clarity of that seeing can happen only when one is Shanta or experiences the Rasa or the understanding of peace or, stability or kind of calm, as one can say. Number of studies, time and again, are showing us that in India, the idea of dharma, the way you understand it for yourself, in your life, in your context, really becomes the basis of well-being and happiness. Both well-being and happiness, if I may add so. And so this whole cultivation of inner purification, the development of vivek, vairagya, samatva or equanimity, nishkam karma, fulfilling your kartavyas in a selfless manner, shraddha, titiksha, endurance, samadhan, satisfaction, santosh, being content with life, and this desire to, or, mumukshvam, this desire to know more for liberation. So all of these really become the means to ensuring your well-being. And we have seen in the snippets that I just shared, how relationships need to be navigated in alignment with all of the above. And unless we do that, I think in our context, it might be very difficult to aspire for well-being in any context for that matter, but more so because we have this traditional knowledge to back us and to support us. We already know better. We just need to execute it in a certain manner in the rush of everyday life. And so one really sees that we need more research in these areas, using these concepts in contemporary life, in contemporary India. And so this brings me to almost my last slide to say, who is the karta? Who are you? Who are you in a relationship? So in established adulthood, it's very important to be a sakha, one to yourself and to your significant others. Similarly, be a sakshi to your own conduct, to your own fallings, to your own strengths. And this perhaps is a way of decoding, adult responsibilities in grihasthashram or in established adulthood. And so I just want to read out what we have already mentioned in one of our publications is that in established adulthood, spouses or partners must aspire to become each other's sakha or friend and sakshi or mirrors unto each other. And this really will be an enabling transformative process of critical self-reflection, introspection. And this traditional model does not then come across as something that is imposed on you, but something that you can empower yourself and kind of, move through this intricate relationship maintenance, the maze of relationship maintenance, especially when there are all these structures around you. And so given this understanding or this backing of a wise tradition, how should all of us respond? How should our contexts look like? And so I come to the policies and the institutions. And so, having said that, interpreting gender role ideologies at the intersection of gender and culture, it's a difficult place to be. It's not easy. But I think each one of us, irrespective of our roles, and perhaps with our roles in mind as well, should be able to identify what are the restrictions or the barriers to optimizing human potentials, whether it is in your daughter-in-law, your son, your husband. What will optimize human potential? What can I do in order to support the other or also to support myself? Sometimes many of these barriers are in your head because gender role ideologies are also imbibed over time because of socialization in the childhood and other influences. I look at also dharma as a system. It's an invisible, intricately working system that can be strengthened only if it remains dynamic and responsive to changing times. So while we say the idea of dharma is sanatan in the broadest sense of the term, the idea of dharma is also novel, nitya nutan. It gives itself to changes without feeling threatened, without feeling the loss of tradition. And so I think as individuals, as members of families, we need to critically engage with the family as a foundational institution, as a cradle of dharma, without the family becoming a restriction in itself. And families, we always kind of, put a lot of premium on the parivar and this and that. But we need to engage with it. It's not always the most democratic of institutions. It is by far a very patriarchal institution. And so a critical engagement with individual and familial well-being at the center will perhaps give us some solutions, and not necessarily easy solutions. Similarly, marital relationships, partnerships, romantic partnerships, friendships, communal relationships, communities, these are all supportive institutions. And instead of competing and compelling each other, I think if we kind of change our perspective to say, okay, I'm going to show up for others and I'm going to cooperate and contribute as a friend, as a partner, as a community, I think a lot might change. And it might also seem very idealistic, but at the same time, it can be brought to fruition through individual effort and no other way. Similarly, workplaces, as we move from the micro to the macro, all of the macro level institutions must look at or must at least aspire to be empowering and scaffold individuals and individual well-being. Otherwise, we keep on regurgitating the ideas of stress at the workplace and building up on PsyCap. And, so it's always this linear model of give this input and have this output, even at a workplace. And so I think my humble submission is to question the linear binary models of productivity and outcome-oriented approaches and replace them with more holistic Indic models, some of which I just shared. And these are some of my references. Thank you very much for a patient listening and all the time. I can stop sharing and maybe we can open it out for discussion. Or if there are any more questions or comments.
Wonderful. Rachana, I think we have time.
to have some questions. So please don't hesitate. Anyone in the audience, we're like very lucky and blessed to have her with you, so with us. So please don't hesitate. So who would like to start? Shilpa,
Thank
you
you.
wanted to say something, or somebody else? Okay, so Nidhi is thanking you for a wonderful integration with the concept of Indian knowledge systems. Yeah,
Thank
insightful
you,
lecture.
Nidhi.
Yeah. Anybody else who would like to ask a direct question?
Yes, please feel free to ask questions because
Yes.
we don't want to stop learning here.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
Please,
sure,
yes.
sure. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
So thank you so much, ma'am, for that very insightful lecture. So I want to understand the role of external influences like technology, media, popular culture. Right now, we are talking about AI, virtual technology, and these are external influences which will impact all the life processes that you have mentioned. So,
Yes.
how do you see these external influences panning out in the kind of work that you are doing? And in that context, the Indic concepts that you have integrated, how can they be applied?
Yeah, thank you. May I know who is asking? Oh, is it Nidhi?
Ma'am,
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, so yes, there are these external influences, no question. In fact, when we had planned Zoya's study, we had not really initially included digital media and the time that couples spend on phones. And once we included that, a new picture emerged altogether. So, yes, these influences are not new. In some form or other, there will always be external influences. And so I think one of the approaches that Indian knowledge systems or Indic systems give us is the idea of Vivek, uh, to be able to experience it, to be able to practice it. So, a simple thing, what is permanent, what is temporary, what is needed right now in this context, in this paristhiti. These are things that we should pause and ask instead of kind of being on autopilot, which many of us, unfortunately, in an urban context are compelled to face. So we are not even aware of what we are doing. I mean, let me not preach sermons here. As soon as you go home, you want to relax. And so many times I find myself just looking at some reels to entertain myself, and I don't realize that it's almost an hour that I'm just sitting and doing this. So, this is true. This is really something that affects all of us. And so, like I said, if you look at the family as a unit, why can't we have a policy to say, how are we going to manage our media time? How are we going to do things together? I mean, it's not impossible. And so, external influences on individual development has always been there. Some threats, some challenges will always be there. And I also feel that sometimes the ideal is presented to us in many of our Indic models is so that there is this aspirational space that is created that can draw us to that end rather than not having something on the anvil. So that would really be my 2 cents of wisdom to say each one can choose. So even when we were preparing or developing this program, people who gave us the grant were really like, okay, make an app. And then as we started talking to Indic scholars, we realized that if we make an app, it will really not have to follow certain rules of gamification, because then again, you're competing against yourself. Oh, yesterday I did the 2 out of 5 things. Today I must do 3. So that itself becomes a stressor. So, how these systems, these modern so-called systems that we have imported mindlessly very often, how do these, we don't even realize that we kind of get sucked into it before we know. I think Shilpa ji wants to say something.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this presentation. I just had one question. You presented this very interesting model of Karta, Sakha, and Sakshi. So, has that been published, or and how did you arrive on that? That's a very interesting model.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, like many other things, this has not been published. So I want to thank you for your time and, of course, some of your writings, because of which we could even arrive at some of these ideas. We are doing some studies on Karma Yoga. We are looking at how individuals approach work. What do they link their attitude to work with in the outside world and in terms of their own motivations. So you cannot talk about being a sakha or a sakshi, which are terms that I have borrowed from Raghu Anantnarayananji's work, where he talks about it in the yogic tradition. But we are also trying to see that can this model work in any context? Because it is so individual centered. Can it work in a marriage? Can it work in a relationship, a romantic relationship? Can it work in friendship? Because, you know, this is so critical to who we are. And one of the experiences that I had in one of his workshops was, you know, very simple to say, you ask questions like a sakha in a group of 3. And it was, you know, one had to prepare for it, although I was in a very friendly group. And so this consciousness, this understanding that I need to ask questions in a manner that are not questioning this other person or judging in any way. Similarly, waiting for your turn, or waiting for time to kind of pass, because we've agreed upon spending time and there are no more questions. So, you know, this discomfort that we experience day in and day out when we constantly need to be doing something. And so, you know, there is no scope in our context to even develop that Sakshi Bhav, or to have that pause and say, hey, let me look at how am I behaving? You know, why am I getting into this pattern with my colleague or with my husband, or why is this happening? And so this pause, this ability to step back and look at yourself is also that is something that the Karta will do. And some of our studies, the qualitative data is really bringing in some of these ideas, or support for these ideas, empirical support for these ideas. Of course, anchored in the idea of dharma very, very broadly. And one can obviously contextualize it to different relationships. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, anybody else? Nidhi has already. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, ma'am, just a quick question
Yeah,
about the kind of research that you did for this project. I mean, I think at this point in time, as contemporary researchers in social sciences, we are facing the challenge of how to integrate concepts and pedagogy in Indic knowledge systems with the kind of research and pedagogy we have been trained with. So how to go about it? You mentioned that you spoke to some Indic scholars. So how to bring in these concepts in the way in which you carried out research for this project? To me, that is very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the advantages that a mixed methods gives you is to look at a positivistic approach versus another more phenomenological, ground up kind of an approach. So that in itself gives you space. In my experience, I think qualitative methods, first person narratives, these are very, very important to integrate cultural concepts, not necessarily Indic alone, but any cultural concepts, especially concepts that are indigenous to groups. So if you're, say, for example, working with the Maoris, so, you know, non-weird, non-Euro-American cultures, I think qualitative research really gives you a lot of scope to look at different worldviews, to look at knowledge systems to, and I think this also goes a long way in moving out from this colonized epistemic, hegemony that is often kind of imposed to us. We kind of integrate it in our training without quite realizing and get into research. And of course, you're very right. There is also tremendous pressure to publish quantitative. It gets published easily. It goes against the grain, but we do it. So one of the approaches that we kind of decided to do was that one, we will do a mixed methods for bigger projects, but at the same time, we will stay connected with Western scholars as well as Indian scholars for another study that we are doing on Karma Yoga and well-being. And we find that the intersections, the perspectives that these people bring in are really eye-opening. So, I mean, I really submit this, that for any research, doing it alone, this, ownership that I alone am enough is a misnomer. I mean, we need collaboration, we need academic communities, we need people of all shades, of all kinds, in order to listen to and understand. And so Indic scholars definitely were a big plus in pointing out to us that, hey, you are getting on the hamster wheel. You are again creating something that is very linear. And so it was easy for them. It was like second nature for many of them to point it out. But for us who are in mainstream academia, where Indic systems are not completely mainstreamed, we find it very difficult, and we kind of see, run of the mill cheeze karte hain. But to have this kind of support, also, I don't want to take away credit from Western scholars. Some of their methodologies, some of their robust designs, I think we can definitely benefit from that. And to make space at the table is all we can do. And I mean, no research is complete and perfect in itself. There's always something else that can be done. But if you can produce a neat enough, defensible enough outcome or product, sometimes the process also is very, very insightful, and the findings may be not extraordinary all the time, but you gain so much through the process. And so both are important for us as researchers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. May I,
Oh,
Rachana,
sure,
intervene here?
please.
Yeah.
Of
See,
course.
there is a question I would like really to have your thought on this, because I've been struggling somehow with this. Okay. I am from Advaita Vedanta kind of foundation, and I have like studied in a traditional setting through Sanskrit text, okay, and Shankara Bhashya. Now, and I come in the academia. Now I am hearing more and more, and I'm myself, of course, very favorable and trying also to build an ecosystem of Indic scholars around this center that we are having at SPJIMR. Now, one difficulty that I have is, for example, when I speak about some so-called other Indic scholar, their understanding, for example, of one of the words that you were saying, Karma Yoga, will be very different from mine, and it will be very different from another one. His understanding of Viveka will be very different from mine and some others, and so on. When we speak about all these, let's say, words in Sanskrit, and which are loaded with many levels of meaning according to the context and so on. So how do you navigate, and how can we expect somehow that this Indic knowledge system and this Indic scholar, which are like really developing in India, how will they not confuse us instead of helping us, right? Or how to go about this and solve this communication basic definition of terms problem? What do you say?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. This is such an interesting question. And I will also invite Shilpaji to join in and share her thoughts, because she's a much more well-grounded, traditionally trained, if I may say so, Indic scholar. See, my exposure to Sanskrit has been 3 years in school, because it was very, very scoring, just like mathematics. I was terrible at mathematics. So in order to make that up, I said, okay, I'll settle for Sanskrit. I loved it. But the way it was taught in school was hardly anywhere close to the rich language and the treasure that it is.
Sure.
Very unfortunate. So I really feel very, very uncomfortable when I have to deal with texts that I really don't have a hang of.
Yeah.
At the same time, having said that, I also feel this should not be something that can stop me or that should stop me from engaging with a text. So like the Bhagavad Gita, which is very common and available, and so there are experts. And I don't think, please correct me if I'm wrong, I really don't think our texts really latch on to a particular meaning and kind of set it in stone. There is always a context when a term is used. So even if scholars disagree on certain things, it's important to understand the context in which this term is used in a certain school of thought.
Exactly.
I'm not
Yeah.
very familiar with those schools of thought, so I will really not, but you're very right in saying that because of these discrepancies or these differences, it definitely deters a lot of young scholars who have perhaps lesser exposure to these texts and Sanskrit than I do. I mean, I'm close to 50, so thankfully some experience or exposure I've had. Those after me, perhaps nothing. So the good thing is that, okay, with the exposure that Indian knowledge systems is giving now, it's much more available than it used to be.
Yes.
I would encourage people to engage, and there is space for everything. There's space for folk literature also in Indian knowledge systems. It's not highly Sanskritized and Sanskrit texts, because if that becomes a barrier, it defeats the purpose of getting it. There are commentaries, there are translations. So you choose your comfort zone and you verify. As a good researcher, you verify, have I understood this properly? Is there another way of understanding it? Am I using it appropriately? So there are these, I mean, that's how the network will grow, according to me. But at the same time, I would also like to add a note of caution. We must weed things that are not IKS. We must weed things that are, sorry, but nonsense.
Thank you
It's just
for,
some
I mean, daring to say
pseudo.
that. It's nice. Yeah. I mean, we need this intellectual kind of, let's say, sharpness and integrity at the same time, right? To be able
So
to
it,
say
it
that. And
it
yeah,
cannot be all hubris, it
yes,
cannot be all, oh, I am an Indian, so no,
exactly.
it is hard work. You will have to engage, you will have to give it time, you will have to give some years of your life to it, and then things will unfold. I mean, it's like any Upanishadic story where you're asked to meditate for 10 years, 100 years, and come back. Thankfully, with technology, we don't have to do so much. Although internally, I'm not sure. Maybe it's 100 years already. And that is why the text has come to you.
Yeah.
Shilpa ji, any thoughts? Oops, I think she just logged out for
Oh,
some
okay.
reason.
Yeah. And if there is no other question, if you allow me to ask another question, is
Sure,
there
sure,
any
sure.
other question from the audience? No? Okay. Another very interesting thing in your work, Rachna, is see, I see it from one of my other anchoring point in what I'm looking at, is this people when they are at work. Okay. So these professionals, when they are at work, what is some of these concepts can really be immediately transposed as they are from family setting to work setting. So that is one remark that I was telling myself. The second thing is that how much if I have, for example, a leadership development training, okay, and of course it's with let's say a purpose to increase their way of working, relating, etc., and also ultimately feeling well and fulfill that one. But then, how much of this family, okay, setting, and this family, you are speaking of low gender identity, you are speaking of being caught in maybe some orthodox kind of, let's say, reading of the same, or some other lecture of having responsibility inside, outside this division and so on. So how does this directly, let's say, have a consequence on the way they will work? They will treat their other gender people, opposite gender people. I'm speaking from both standpoint, right? And how also in this hierarchical manner with the kids, or this in a family setting, it would be with the lower, let's say, hierarchy people or non-hierarchical people. So how does one influence this? Is there any work which has been done on this? And how we can, let's say, inform our executive, hey, that this is determining the way that you are doing now. So look at it, please,
Yes,
and
yes,
change if
yes,
you can,
yes.
and we'll help you to
Yes.
change. Yeah.
Right. No, thank you. This is a great question. There is work by index scholars in the corporate world, working with organizations like Tata's and others, wherein they
Okay.
have kind of infused these concepts. And I'll be happy to send you some references or connect you
Wonderful.
with those people.
Wow.
But at the same time, I mean, from a human development perspective,
Yes.
if I can, share some of my thoughts, see, whether it's a leader, an employee, anyone in a work context, that person goes home. That person has grown up in a family. And
Yeah.
so the templates, developmentally, we talk about these things to say there is a prototype, there is a template, the way you relate to your mother, that
Yes.
or the first attachments, that will kind of, become like a blueprint for a number of your relationships later in life. And likewise, I mean, particularly in India, the family really becomes like a prototype where hierarchies, jealousies,
Yeah.
attitudes, everything is I mean, when you call it the cradle of dharma, it can also be the cradle of adharma, because they
Absolutely.
coexist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have never quite understood why workplaces don't engage with where are your employees coming from. So when we talk about work-life balance, we almost always feel that, okay, take them out for a picnic once in 6 months, have some retreat, get the families, dress up. It is, and it is, I mean, it's a very weirdly American way of dealing with things.
Absolutely. I always react like
Most
you. Yeah.
most of our leadership models, at least the popular ones, are about go do this, get that, achieve this. It's never about stability. It's never about understanding or maintenance. I mean, we have excellent leadership models. We have women, if you look at our grandmothers who used to manage big families, I would not say they were any less of being a leader, managing different temperaments, different age groups, doing it very patiently. And when the whip had to be cracked, it was done. So, but that's a largely unacknowledged model of
Right.
compassion. The most closest work I can refer to is JBP Sinha's Nurture and Task Leader,
Okay.
classic organizational psychology work that he has done, early 2000s, that he published. So that really talks about and when it comes to gender, I mean, it's a Pandora's box, because there are internalized ideas or ideologies related to gender, and so women and men, the way they kind of play those roles, I have no hesitation in saying that many times the template is still very familiar.
Yeah.
There's this one karta, the father, who is taking decisions, and everybody aligns, and age, gender. See, all hierarchies are not bad, but all hierarchies must have spaces to be able to talk about social justice, to be able to talk about, voicing out your opinions. All of that is important. And the idea of dharma really instills in you what questions can you ask and what is offhands for you, I mean, off limits for you. So that intrinsic training can come only through responsibility training. And many times, in trying to be more democratic, perhaps we really mess things up.
Yeah.
I mean, what is democracy in the true sense within a family and within a workplace? I think these are discussions we should be having. without being
Absolutely.
disrespectful, how can you break this pattern? So
Excellent.
yeah, I mean,
I'm
we
so
really
happy to
need to
hear.
bridge
Yeah,
the work and the family.
yeah. So happy to hear also that because, as you know, I can speak about what I've been doing last 10 years in this management education space.
Right.
So it's
Right.
true that I hardly see anything which is coming from this space, and I don't see why I could not invite you or any other person which is in this space to make our either senior or youngster understand their condition and their, let's say, inner working
Yeah.
attitudes and so on
Yeah.
through another lens than uh, 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 this Western, which have a good share, as you say. We don't fall into this bashing out
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
Western model,
True.
but there is a big space and we don't have it. I see myself, even in the models I teach. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love the conversation,
Thank you. Thank you
Rachana.
so much.
Yeah.
I mean, now that there is an opportunity, let me also say earlier we were into this,
Yeah.
division called home science or home
Yeah.
economics. And that again became a gendered space. We really fought hard to break that stereotype, and we do now have a number of male students as well. But at the same time, nobody, I mean, we are still called home science, and as if that should have nothing to do with the workplace or professional, anything that
Absolutely.
is remotely professional. And so that is also a conversation. It's very, very gendered. The stereotype is very strong. So I'm glad you're saying that we could call each other and talk about
Yes,
bridge
I
these
think there
gaps
are
as
many
such.
things, and we need to, between ourselves, to have these forums and have more of this. And really, this is also the vocation of the Center of Wisdom. We're wisdom in the center, but we're a platform where we can exchange ideas and build some frameworks and some new approaches and ways to heal our things or orient us in this confusion, because we are in a transition as an Indian society,
Yes.
as you have shown very well. So we need some anchoring points, we need something, and I would be very happy to offer this opportunity through this platform that we're having.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much. I look forward to that.
Okay, so to all
Any
the
more
audience, thanks for being all here
questions or
and
comments?
in big numbers.
Yeah, now the numbers have gone
Comments.
down.
Yeah.
I
So it's
can't.
time that we close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad we kept to time. I was a little concerned because we
Yes.
started late. But thank you everyone for your support, for showing up, and I hope this was worth your time. And thank you to the center once again, Gisha, for making all the arrangements. I really gave her a tough time in terms of not giving things on time and making her wait. But thank you, Gisha, for your patience.
Oh,
And
not at all, ma'am. Not at all. Happy to
One,
help.
so wonderful. And thanks a lot again, Dr. Rachana,
thank you.
for
Thank you so
being
much,
with us,
Surya ji.
and
Thank
hope
you.
to catch on with you soon. Yeah.
Yes, yes, please. I mean, feel free to reach out. My email is with Gisha as well as on the slides. I'll share my slides with Gisha very
Wonderful.
soon. So we can stay in touch. Thank you so
Okay.
much, everyone.